Welcome to the Fortean Winds podcast, where we talk about UFOs and all the related high strangeness. I go by Bones, and with us, as always, is Romex.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rom, it's good to have you on the air because I've been really wanting to catch up with all the UAP news that's been going on. We've had that 3-part series about the occult and the Nazis, but even though it seems like there's not much going on, there really is, and we have to catch up on that stuff.
Yeah, it's always different depending on which side of the news you're looking at. If you're,
right,
in the UFO community, it seems like disclosure is always imminent, and there's a whole economy and a group of people who are pushing that narrative, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. We don't really talk about that as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to kind of focus too much on what's going on in the government, and are they going to expose all the real information? There's a lot that's going on that we could, a lot of puzzle pieces we can use to put it all together, but it's kind of the same old stuff, but we have to keep track of it all.
I think that's the intro for newer listeners, and for our older listeners, who wants to take bets on whether or not we can do a current events episode without pissing off 50% of people out there?
Right. It's part of the scene.
All right. Well, let's get into it. And my goal is to get out of this without causing any form of controversy just by talking about UFO news. We're just talking about UFO news.
Right.
That's it. Just like any other podcast.
Yeah. To tell you, the one thing that stuck out in my mind, and maybe I mentioned it previous episodes, but there was a written testimony by a retired, I believe, Navy Rear Admiral, and I think it's someone that you met at in San Francisco, and he had written testimony. What's his name? Gallat? I might get his name.
Tim Galladay. Yeah.
That's his name. And really fascinating document. You can go online and find it. It's a written testimony to Congress, and his argument is that it's getting to the point where people in the Navy are basically desensitized by how common it is. So they're seeing objects constantly, and it's so constant, it's not even being discussed.
So we're living in two realities here. There's a reality where people know UFOs are real, and there's another reality where people either think they are not real or are choosing to deny their reality.
Right.
So Tim Galladay's point and Ryan Graves' point, who is also leading the charge for pilot safety in regard to UAP, is that this has to be addressed because it's getting closer and closer to pilots. Pilots are saying it's a hazard. It's causing all sorts of issues with training exercises. And that stuff costs millions.
Right.
It costs millions of dollars every time you have to turn that friggin' boat.
Yeah. And Gallaudet, his main function was basically a meteorologist, making sure that conditions were good.
Safe.
Yeah, we're safe for training and exercises and whatnot. So that was a big deal for him.
So I think that's a good way to frame also the disclosure movement in general. So you see Lou Elizondo, and it's pretty funny what's going on with him talking about current events. I'm sorry to laugh, but he showed a picture at a conference of what ended up turning out to be farming equipment, and he thought it was a UFO, right?
Okay.
It was just given to him that morning, and he was like, look, here's something someone gave me. This needs to be investigated. And he was saying, look, I didn't know. I didn't vet it. Whoops. And the UFO community, they are not taking
that's not good.
That lightly. Yeah. So everyone who had a problem with Lou Elizondo started taking shots and doing one of the, I'm going to take a sabbatical to reconsider my positions on some of these things. Like when celebrities get busted saying racist stuff, they're like, I'm gonna go meet with a spiritual hero.
Right. Damage control.
Yeah, Lou's doing one of those. But that's a good way for me to at least clarify how I feel about Lou Elizondo and several of the people in that world. I know I've been asked about it a few times on different shows, and I think I can clarify that point of view a little more today. That I view those people as politicians. You could call them influencers if you like, but politicians, influencers, they're intending to do the same thing. Politicians are intending to influence you to vote for them.
Right.
Influencers are intending to influence you to vote for politicians or take some other action on behalf of them,
Right.
even if it's monetary in gain, right?
Yeah.
So that's who they are. Even Gary Nolan, who I have a respect for, and I think he's genuine in his interest in science and disclosure, but they are politicians, which means they're also going to play games.
Yeah.
And we hope that it's on our behalf. It's in order to get disclosure. And that's what they keep telling us. People like Mellon and Elizondo and Nolan and Valet, they're like, look, we're playing with the government, but we're doing so for you, and we're trying to get what we can, and we're trying to get this all out.
Yeah, I mean, much like politicians who are kind of quasi-celebrities on cable news. I mean, they have this kind of this celebrity status, and they probably have pressures. They're probably feeling pressure to come up with something else, fill up some time.
They have to keep momentum. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's influence. That's what politicians do, right? This is your issue. If UFOs are your issue, then you have to keep introducing new information all the time to keep people interested. Right. And you have to keep saying disclosures just around the corner. Or why would anyone be interested? How are you going to keep people interested?
Right.
At the same time that you're doing that, you're also kind of bullshitting people.
A little bit, yeah.
Right? Politicians do that all the time, which is another way we can get into some disclosure stuff and why we've kind of been avoiding talking about current events. Because the Trump administration has shown zero interest in disclosure.
Yeah, it seems to be the same old scenario.
So that committee that was started in Congress, which we said a while back, we were like, I feel encouraged by this. That I think Anna Paulina Luna is genuine in her interest in disclosure. But again, she's a politician. She has to play games. Let me tell you, when Grush went in there the first time, 2 years ago now, he gave them names. He gave them locations. All they had to do was go there, look at the stuff, and talk to the people.
Right.
But they stopped them. That's what Luna said. While Biden was president, they stopped them, right? And they needed some sort of congressional authority. They needed presidential authority to go in there and look at the stuff. Biden didn't give that to them. Trump is not giving that to them. It's the same.
Same old.
And what's making some of the things about the Trump administration worse towards disclosure is that they're throwing up smoke screens. So this committee that they started with Luna was supposed to be about UAPs only. But as she mentioned, it ended up being about a bunch of conspiracy stuff. They threw in 9/11. They threw in Epstein. They threw in JFK.
Right. I gotcha. Yeah. So they clumped it into this huge push to disclose all kinds of stuff. They're
like, we're going to disclose all of it at once. And then what they threw up was smoke screens on all of it.
Right.
Now, here's why a smokescreen is worse than a denial. Because a smokescreen is intended to end the conversation. Let's take the mystery drone event, for example. If the government says, we can't talk about it, the conversation is ongoing. Because it's like, what do you mean you can't talk about it? What do you mean? Let's look at more details. Why can't they talk about it? The conversation keeps going. But if the government says they were all FAA-approved test drones that made us move our most advanced stealth fighters out of our most advanced Air Force base in our own country,
right?
It's intended to end the conversation with a very stupid lie.
Yeah. And
when it comes to UFOs, the media will swallow that lie for the most part.
Pretty much, yeah.
But we are seeing some cracks in that, right? With the mystery drone event, it took, I don't know how many months for them to admit that the so-called mystery drones were UAP. We told you that back in December, the first week of December. Right?
Yeah.
And that is now our, right? That's our most popular episode of all time now. It was our Colonel Mustard moment where we were like, they're UAP, and we could prove it in less than a half an hour on a friggin' audio podcast. And it took 6 months, but 60 Minutes did a piece on it recently where they first talked about the mystery drones. And then this is how they handled it. And I respect this. They brought in a second segment where they brought in Lou Elizondo and they talked about UAP. So there's a good example of how Lou Elizondo serves the community. Like, I'm not here to be an apologist for him. It's not at all. Like, I'm telling you that they're a politician. So I trust them as much as I trust any politician, which is not much.
Right. As it comes to UAPs or the whole drone phenomenon, it's only shifted. So we don't see much news coming out of New Jersey about it anymore. But now there's news about sightings around the border and around Arizona. And there's like Border Patrol folks now reporting that they're seeing them. And they're becoming desensitized by it too.
Yeah, that's interesting that the Border Patrol, Ross Coulthart did an interesting interview with a guy recently, right? That talked about how they see them all the time. So they're living in this alternate reality too, where UAP are real and they have to be dealt with somehow.
Right.
You go, well, what's really going to tip that balance? What's really going to push it over the edge? And we'd say material evidence in the public that is undeniable. And in the midst of all this, what shows up?
Yes, the Buga sphere in Colombia. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. The Buga sphere was spotted flying in Colombia. There's multiple shots of video of it flying. And this was first captured on March 2nd on 2025. What is alleged at this point is that the Buga sphere ran into a electrical discharge and it fell. The person who recovered the sphere was out there metal detecting.
Okay.
And he didn't know what to do with it. So he brought it to the company that made his metal detector that was in the area. And that company was called the Germany company. And they started to analyze the object. They had people who were familiar with engineering and science there, and they started to analyze the object and publicize some of the videos. So what they found was that the object had no joints or welds. The composition of the object was mostly aluminum and other natural elements, but there were some very strange things about the composition of the outside that made it odd, but also not looking extraterrestrial.
And so for anyone who hasn't seen a picture, it has been described as being about 8 inches in diameter.
They're saying roughly the size of a bowling ball, but that's a pretty small bowling ball, huh?
Yeah, it seems like it, doesn't it? But it also had some strange encryptions on it too, right? Like it looks like the pictures I saw, it looked like it was a rough sketch of a circuit.
Yeah, it had a rough sketch of a circuit, and then there was other things that looked more ancient and sort of hieroglyphic around it.
Right.
So it matches some of the other strange object that we've seen flying. And then there were scans of the interior of the object done, and the interior has a cavity that's in the shape of like a mushroom cloud. And according to one of the scientists studying it, if you spun the object around fast enough and with that interior, there would be an effect that could be produced that would cause the object to levitate, but you wouldn't be able to steer it.
Okay.
And that's pretty interesting because we were just talking about how we thought the Nazis actually did this.
Right.
And that it was some type of electromagnetic lift, but they couldn't steer it. So then you have people like Jake Barber and Skywatchers, who we'll talk about today too, and they're talking about the psychic connection. And there's a lot of other people who would say that these things are controlled somehow telepathically.
Okay.
They were pouring water over it, and that's one of the tests that this Germany company did that proved that there was no joints or welds. So it would have had to have been molded. The interior would have been made first, and then it would have been molded. So could it have been faked? Yes, it's possible. And we need more data to come forward, and it's being studied further. That company, the Germany company, obviously it was a little suspicious because they were the ones with it. They were advertising their company, and everyone's going to their company website. And they said, oh, they're using their instruments to test it, which is cool, but at the same time, it was a little suspicious. So
okay. Yeah.
The CEO of that company wisely handed off the object to Jaime Maussan, who has also been taking charge of a lot of the Nazca Mummy investigation and involved in a lot of that too.
Interesting.
So Maussan is well known throughout Latin America as a UFO researcher. He's been right and wrong in the past, and that's going to happen.
But he was the one who brought it all in front of the Mexican Congress, right? I mean, he took the chance, and he was taken seriously.
He was taken seriously, and he brought a case against Peru recently against the Ministry of Culture for like $200 million.
Oh.
He lost the case. It was dismissed.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah. But he gave it a shot. And that just happened. So, but he's out there and he's making noise and he's doing the right things. Again, you're looking at a politician. You know, he's going to get things right or wrong. Like, we're looking at these people like Elizondo and Nolan and Putoff and Targ. We're saying, you know, what are they telling? Are they telling us the bottom line truth? And no, they never are. They're still in touch with the government. They still have to watch their butts. Right? Are they playing some sort of game on our behalf? That's up for everyone to decide. You know, I say we take their information for whatever it is. We validate what we can, and then we move on.
Right. It's just, you got a lot of influencers, you got politicians, you know, and then in the middle are the actual experiencers, you know, and they're the ones that have to like really feel the struggle and really feel the bullshit too. I mean, it's just
right.
I don't know. It just stinks that all that information has to come out in the way it does, because there are people with real experiences that want real answers to it.
Yeah, talk about someone who's living in a UFO reality. I mean, abductees, contactees, experiencers. These are people who can't deny the UFO reality and want and need answers. Right. So Masan is connected to a bunch of scientists down there in Latin America, and he's able to get it into people's hands. So what's happening with, this is a kind of a good overlap here, is because what's happening with the Buga is the same thing that's happening with the Nazca Mummies, is Masan's getting it in the hands of scientists and experts. They're doing reviews, and then they're publishing the data, and then people in, especially the United States, are coming back and saying, this is all lies. This is not, those aren't real. This is fake humans. This is all fake, without ever going there and looking at the actual bodies. Right. And then there's this demand that the bodies be brought here for some sort of real validation into the center of the UFO cover-up and brought to the University of Tennessee. Is that going to prove it to anyone? Absolutely not. Right. And it puts it into the place where things are disappearing the most. Right. Why would all these other countries who have all these other universities and access to the same data and science and brain power we do, trust us? And why are we the proof capital of the world? Or not? We're not, no. It's absolute nonsense. So if people want to say it's not proven, great, go down there and do some analysis of the bodies. Because what came back recently were scans of the eggs on the interior of those bodies, and there were capillaries connected to the eggs within the bodies. Yeah, amazing. That ruled out fake. And the bodies were dated finally to 1,750 years ago. So if the bodies were faked, someone either had to make a fake that would withstand that type of scrutiny. And we can't say that that's impossible at this point, but it just becomes less and less possible as time goes on. So the critics are saying either they're human and that somehow somebody stuck eggs in there, or which means that they're mutilated humans, or that they're non-human. The DNA scans that have come back are showing a greater than 50% chance that they are not human. Right. But greater than 50% doesn't mean 100%. So a lot more study has to be done. But these things are far from disproven. They've only gotten closer to being perceived as inevitable, because there's never going to be a time when they're considered proven. Right, right. Pretty much. And while they've been studying these specimens, they've been coming up with more specimens. There's now like 100 of these that they need to study. So this is far from over, and it's only gotten bigger. Here's one potential red flag in this case, which is the original video. So these Nazca mummies were said to have been found by tomb raiders. Right. And the tomb raiders are still involved, right? And they're still producing these things. And they say that they've sold some of the things that you see in the video on the black market, so they're not available. These things were in headdresses and things like that. They say that they've been sold. They say that they've sold some of the specimens to private collectors on the black market. So those are gone. And then in the original video, they showed beings, even a mantis being, and what looked like beings that were alive, and that they had some sort of altercation with them. Okay. Yeah, I faintly remember that, yeah. Remember that? Yeah. That's a little sketchy. Maybe they faked the video but found the bodies. It's also possible. Maybe the video is real. That would be the craziest one.
Yeah.
Like if the bodies are proven, but then these guys would know where these live beings are.
Right.
So that part of the story gets really sketchy.
Yeah, it does. So we're left to wait. We'll see what develops. But so far, it's easier to accept than to deny the fact that it's something non-human.
Yeah, the implants are very strange. If the bodies are that old and have osmium implants, either they are not human or something else was going on there that was wildly anomalous and not human as we know it.
Yeah.
Like maybe they might be human, but something else was going on there that's wildly different.
Yeah. So we have to talk about the Immaculate Constellation whistleblower, Matthew Brown. There was a 3-part series on YouTube. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp did an interview. And that was basically the name of the top secret file, Immaculate Constellation, right?
Right. So that was entered into congressional record months ago during the trial where Michael Schellenberger was the journalist who entered it in. And Jeremy Corbell was also the one who brought this document forward. And he was in touch with the whistleblower. And so Knapp and Corbell did a 3-hour interview with Matthew Brown on their Weaponized podcast. And there was a lot said. It was pretty interesting. But the document that made Matthew Brown such an important whistleblower was this Immaculate Constellation document. And the Immaculate Constellation actually referred to a database that Matthew Brown encountered during his time as an analyst in the Pentagon. And this database was filled with UAP information. And what's important about it is that it was not connected to any other database. So when many other people, including people like Edward Snowden, say, I had access to all this stuff and I never saw the UAP, or Elon Musk even said that recently, and it's like, you wouldn't, because it's on a completely separate database, and it's called Immaculate Constellation.
Right.
And Matthew Brown found it, right? And he goes through the whole story on that podcast of how he encountered it and what happened when they found out that he encountered it. And he gets into a lot about how he's feeling in danger for his life for what he's been saying.
Yeah. I mean, you could genuinely see the fear in him. I mean, he's concerned for sure.
And what makes him a whistleblower on a whole other level is that he's talking about all this stuff without any sort of authority.
Right.
So when he enters it into congressional record, he's relying on Congress to keep him safe from all of the powers that be. And that's pretty risky because Congress doesn't even have the ability to go onto these bases and go view this UAP material. So he's relying on them for his security.
Right. I mean, one of the early points, too, is that the fact that he saw Elizondo in the Shriver file. It had a picture of him. It was a 2018 war game brief. It had a actual picture of Elizondo. And in the same brief, it had a picture of the Russian Navy ship with a giant black triangle over it.
Right. Then that was wild because, as he mentioned, whatever was taking that video was already there. So they knew, they were already observing the Russians. And those were, he made the point that they were intelligence vessels. They were not military vessels. Right. That's pretty interesting too. But back to the point of whether or not we can trust what he's saying and the risks that we see here. He entered that into the congressional record. He's talking to Congress. He's saying this stuff, which means if he's lying, he can go to jail.
Right.
Same thing with David Grush. If he's lying, they can go to jail. Right. That's perjury. And I can't imagine that these Congress people would look kindly on someone wasting their time with fairy tales.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. We always have to remind people that they are going in front of Congress, swearing an oath. You lie, you're in big trouble.
And they entered that document, the Immaculate Constellation document, into the congressional record.
Yeah.
That's as legal as it gets.
Right.
So you go to jail if you're playing that sort of game. So if Matthew Brown is a disinformation or misinformation agent, he's playing a very, very dangerous game. This is not the type of games that these people play.
Right.
So he doesn't look like that to us, period. So one of the things that he mentioned on there that we've talked about heavily is that we live in a controlled reality. And I like the way that he put it that way. He did get into the simulation thing, and we'll get into that too.
Yeah.
But I like saying controlled reality over simulation because it gets into the idea that even if this is a Truman Show type simulation where it's physical and our reality is being controlled through control over our history and our information and our science, that's still a type of a simulation, right?
Right.
When he says it's a simulation, we're saying it's a simulation. There's a lot of different ways that could break out. And you can go as deep as you want to go into the UAP research and its connection to reality and how deep that control goes, right? But you can go into our Hacking UFO episodes and our follow-up, the consciousness episode afterwards. Those are good places to lose your mind. So, but Brown really went into how public perceptions are managed around UAP issues. And this is why disclosure is not imminent in this way. And we talked about why Lou and those people have to play it that way. But this is the grown-up show, and we're not, we can understand that that's part of politics. It's not imminent unless the Trump administration wants it to be.
Right.
And there's no indication that they want it to be.
Nope. No one wants to be the disclosure president. It's just the way it is.
And if their disclosures around JFK and Epstein were any indication, they're just going to tell us stuff we already know and pretend like it's new.
Right. Yep.
And say, oh, look, campaign promise fulfilled.
Right.
And Brown discussed the types of visual evidence that were conducted.
Yeah, and so, the visual evidence was really big that Brown disclosed. He said orbs were basically the prevalent UAP in the military, where there's just orbs everywhere. Of course, the triangles, there's two different sizes of triangles, and having that visual evidence of them being near Russian ships that looked like it was they had foreknowledge of this triangle being there. It's stuff we've heard before, but it's coming straight out of files that he's seen with his own eyes.
Yeah.
And
again, this solidifies something we've seen in our own independent research and something we've been trying to understand is that you have UAP that are orbs and appear to be plasmoid. That's the way the Condign report would have phrased it.
Yeah.
But they also appear to be moving intelligently at times. And then you have structured craft. So it's very difficult to parse those out. But those are two features of the phenomenon. We don't have to figure out how they're connected.
Right.
We just call them out as features at this point. Their connections will make sense over time.
Personally, I was hoping for a cube and a transparent sphere, because I'll never forget. That's the best UAP in my mind. Haven't heard.
You're back to your cube in the sphere again.
I want it to come back. Show me the cubes.
I'm going to get you a cube and a sphere for Christmas.
Right. But that was one of them. It's just, but we hear about spheres more is the point, and they're everywhere, and they're just becoming desensitized by it.
Yeah, that actually you bring up a good point, because the cube was in a sphere. So if something is inside of a sphere and it's glowing, everything looks like a sphere, right?
Yeah, true.
And that sphere in that case looked like glass.
Right.
So we're 99% sure that means that there's a vacuum around the object. It's producing a vacuum around the object. So any object that was floating with a sphere around it that was illuminated would look like an orb too.
Right.
But these orbs tend to be small, not objects, like very small too. So it's difficult to say. Interesting possible scenario there.
Right.
And Brown really focused on how secrecy and disclosure were working. And when we talk about these things for our newer listeners, because we've been growing a lot lately, y'all should go back and listen to how we got here.
Yeah.
But when we talk about secrecy and disclosure, we're really talking about the disclosure movement And there's UFO research, like what we were just doing in the World War II stuff. And then there's this, which is the disclosure movement. And I would really encourage the audience to look at those things as two different things.
Right. Don't
expect to learn more about the UFO phenomenon from Lou's Clues or Gary's Berries or whatever the next social media post is coming. I just made up Gary's Berries right now. That's not bad.
I like that, yeah.
And like I said, it's not because we don't like those guys, but we understand the game that they're playing. Mm-hmm. And we'll take what we can get from it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess now that we're even talking about it, I mean, that 3-part series did kind of annoy me because there was a lot of talk without really saying much. But I understand that they're tiptoeing a really, a dangerous line, really. And they could tell that Brown has some real fears. I guess I should cut him some slack. I don't like the obvious, push to throw an F-bomb once in a while because you got to be a bro about it. I can't stand that stuff, but yeah, there's just some genuine fears there.
There's a lot of broism in ufology.
Yeah, unfortunately.
There's way too much broism in ufology. And, it all tracks back to, it's just like martial arts, right? There's way too much martial arts in ufology. I'm so annoyed because I can never talk about martial arts or use martial arts. And I won't even talk about my own life in martial arts because it's just way too much in ufology. Like when Jake Barber comes out, we should talk about Skywatchers too. Yeah. But when Jake Barber comes out, he has to come out and talk all about his jiu-jitsu background. Right. Like how is this coming up again?
Right. I don't know why that always has to be there. I don't get it.
Are we going to have a karate fight with the aliens? Right. Is that where this is all going? Yeah. And it's all, I know, I've figured out why, as I have to do, right? It's Rogan, man. It's Rogan. Like, right. Rogan is the start of podcasting, essentially. And he's also a huge UFO buff. And we actually have to thank him for that. Both. Like if there was no Joe Rogan into UFOs and podcasting didn't take off like it did, I don't know that we'd be in the same place. So along with all the other people like that, like Lou and Gary and all those other, like that media does serve a huge purpose and it is raising awareness. But don't expect the answers to come from there.
Right.
The answers will come from either research or experience. That we're sure of.
Right.
And speaking of research, Brown said some things at the end, which were huge shoe drops that made everyone go, wait, what? Mm-hmm. And that's when it got good, right? At the end, he said, at the end, when Corbell says, is there anything you would want people to know if this is the last time you're going to talk to the public? And it was, God is real. You live in a controlled reality. And he also said that there's still time to make for a better future, even though it's not the one we have planned, but we really don't want the one that they are planning for us.
And they being
all things.
Who is they in that scenario?
Well, the they in that scenario would be the powers that be who are aware of this UFO phenomenon intimately, right, and intimately involved in it. And then I would guess, this is just me guessing, that would involve some faction of the NHI as well. Of course, this goes back to the fact that Grush said there have been agreements.
Right.
Agreements were made. So if those things are true, then yes, there is those people who are intimately familiar with and interacting with this phenomenon, and the phenomenon itself who has its own plans. And then there's us.
Right.
You and me, an accordion, some hats. We do the dance.
They give dance.
Us no, not just us. I mean, the rest of us in the public. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. And Brown kind of closed that out by saying, if there are whistleblowers out there, now is the time. He made it sound like something was imminent. He also made it sound like the government was imminently going to lie to us. It's something Corbell's been saying, too, that they're going to be saying that there's an alien invasion coming.
Right.
And then to further that, were some podcasters in the public, some pretty big ones, who've been saying that the government reached out to them to try to get them to further that lie. And they would do the thing where they try to create assets or agents, depending on we can get into the difference there. I think that's really important for the public to understand. They were saying that they had reached out to them to try to get them to push that lie.
Right.
Did you get an email?
I didn't.
I did not get one either.
No.
I cannot believe you guys didn't invite us to your disinformation party.
Yeah, right.
Look, just drop us a note, romx at forteanwinds.com and leave us your return address.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, all they got to do is drop us a line, give us maybe their home address, their hopes and dreams. What they're
We'll get right back to you. Which actually that gets into something I wanted to talk about here was asset and agent, because there's been a number of things that have come out about a number of people that we've talked about, and I'm like, I don't even want to review all of them, but people like Tom DeLonge, there's been things said about, and Jimmy Church did an investigation where he's like, this To the Stars organization that he's heading is a CIA front. And we've always said Tom is an asset, like even by his own admission. And people like Diana Pasulka, who are very smart, are like, they're trying to use me as an asset. She's at least self-aware of it.
Yeah.
Tom does not seem to be aware of that. Like, no offense to him. Maybe he is. But let's talk about the difference between an asset and an agent, because I hear this thrown around a lot in politics too. They're like, this guy's an asset, he's an agent.
Right.
Anyway, so what an asset is someone who does not know for whom they work or what they're trying to do, right? They're just doing it. Mm-hmm. And then the intelligence person will push behind them.
Okay.
So maybe they provide resources, maybe they provide support, maybe they have an audience that they send and go like and engage with this person's stuff because it's what we want to say.
Right.
Russian intelligence is a master of all of this stuff, right? Like they're doing this all the time. And if they're like, this person has a pro-Russian narrative, like, give them some funding, give them some, this happens all the time, right? So that's how assets work. They don't know who they work for. And so that's what makes them the perfect resource, even maybe better than an agent, because you don't have to pay them. They can't track it back to you. They don't know it was you.
Yeah, right.
You're doing something illegal. You're getting them to do something illegal. And no one can ever track it back to you because they never know it was you that they were working for.
Right.
That's what makes them an asset. And then an agent is someone who knows their mission. They know that they're working for it. So even if someone's getting blackmailed and they're like, hey, we've got these pictures of you and you have to do this and push this, even if it's someone who knows that they're doing it for you for that reason, they're an agent. It can be tracked back to you.
Right.
So that's super important when it comes to the UFO topic, right? It ends up being a lot of people out there that are assets, that are saying something that these gatekeepers want them to say. And maybe it is something UFO related, but it obfuscates the truth. Like these people trying to disabuse abductions and trying to make them into nothing.
Right.
Like that's not true. We have a ton of information about it. Anyone saying that is trying to cover it up.
Yes, speaking of misinformation, you got to talk about Greer a little bit, right?
Oh,
the lizard man
Greer.
himself.
Yeah, okay. Yes, yeah, okay. What you
wow,
got
this is so much. What's he talking about? He's talking about like he knows a physicist that can basically that has a device where he can travel to different dimensions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
the toroidal. He says he's transported creatures into his lab and talked to them. Okay,
that's cool. Right.
I want to know more.
And of course, he's been bribed. He's been given he's denied a $2 billion bribe to stop doing what he's doing. $2
billion.
So he could be a billionaire right now if he wasn't on TV bugging his eyes out about how he knows everything. It's just
okay.
It's amazing. There's so much there. I don't know.
So he says all abductions are done by the government. That's the one that really gets me. That's the one that pisses me off.
Yeah.
Most.
Or like the mutilations, the cattle mutilations are all staged, right?
Yes. They're all staged. And like the ones where the guy's like, it happened in a half an hour and there's missing time. Can the government afford a cattle ranch?
Right.
I do think that they were doing some experimentation. Colin Keller thinks that they were doing some experimentation during Mad Cow, and that they've been looking at cows that we eat just to see what we're eating. And maybe there's something with that, but not the anomalous ones that have radiation. Why would they be using advanced UFO reproduction vehicles to do cattle mutilations?
Right.
Maybe or maybe not. We used to tip cows without any UFO needs.
Yeah. It's kind of a strange scenario because, the phenomenon is getting more active, basically. There are more people talking about it, and then he finds himself being more irrelevant at the same time, which is, doesn't seem...
So he keeps ramping up the story, right? We're seeing this all over UFO media because that's not UFO research. Actual UFO research boils down to a few hundred people globally.
Right. But according to Greer, 1 in 5 people worldwide have seen his film.
You got a source on all this?
Yeah. There's a source. I mean, there's a Reddit post that's awesome, and it just bullet points everything. I mean, it's very clear cut. I mean, it's really kind of
nice.
It's kind of funny to see it all kind of in one page because it really does show the ridiculousness.
Yeah,
of it
video of him saying stuff.
Right. Yeah,
that's great. Him in his own words. I love it when we can talk about these people in their own words or show you clips of them saying it in their own words.
Right.
It's not me saying it. Every time I have these Greer conversations, someone's like, how do you know? How do you know?
Right.
Like, he said it because he said it. That's how.
Right.
And that's UFO media, right? That's UFO media. And that's what we're end up talking about when we talk about current events. And that's what people really want to hear about. And that's okay. We'll give you our POV. But that's UFO media, like the UFO research, like what's going on in the Hesselden, Norway. Those are UAP that are being studied all the time.
Right.
Some of these contact experiencers are being studied all the time, 24/7. So you want to know about UFOs, like that's the stuff really. And what Jake Barber's been doing with Skywatchers, I think that's super informative and more people should be watching that. I just looked at it before we started this to make this point. And the first Skywatchers episode had 600,000 views and the second one had about 400,000 views. So these guys went out with remote viewers, filmed it all. The production value is beautiful. They had Gary Nolan as their scientific advisor on the set. They had the guy from SALT doing the hosting, and the production value is beautiful. So you couldn't ask for better. They're driving their G.I. Joe, super cool UFO hunting vehicles around. Who's funding them? I would love to know. Right. That's interesting. They're driving around doing this, and they're shooting this really cool stuff, and they film UFOs on camera. They have videos of them. They have multi-sensor instrumentation that are measuring all sorts of things. And so they're doing all of the things that we say we want and that are necessary to prove the UFO phenomenon. And they've had less than 700,000 people watch the first episode.
Yeah.
To that point, if Greer comes out and says the apocalypse is now, and the aliens just told me the secret that will allow you to survive the apocalypse with superpowers, he's going to get 2 million hits.
Right.
So if you're looking for disclosure and you want to take the easy route, you're just going to get a string of those. You're going to get years and years and years of Greer telling you the same thing over and over and over. The apocalypse is now, the aliens are bros, etc.
Yeah.
It's basically a new UFO religion.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of these running around that are just trying to turn ufology into a religion.
And then you
replace angels with aliens, right?
Yeah. And then you make sure to click on that banner for your apocalyptic food buckets that you can buy.
But if you want to see some good material and you want to learn more about the UFO phenomenon, take the time to watch 1 hour of those 2 episodes on Skywatchers. I think they did a really good job.
Yeah.
And there's a play there, right? They're also getting into the media game, the UFO media game. So they want to make us do something too.
Yeah.
There's a call to action behind it.
Right.
Yeah. And it's up to you to determine whether you think that's right or wrong. But it looks to me like it's earnest.
Mm-hmm.
One other person we've talked a lot about, there's been some recent developments with, is Chris Bledsoe. And he went on the Sean Ryan podcast. You may not have seen this, but he said something is coming next Easter. And so April of 2026. And he was saying that this is going to be a major event. And in some way, he related back to Jesus's coming back.
Okay. So yeah, he's a deeply religious man who has produced some results in the same sense that, Yahweh produced results, right? Didn't he produce?
Yeah, Prophet Yahweh.
Prophet Yahweh. Yeah, I just call him Yahweh.
Yahweh.
I just call him Yahweh. He's legit, but he's also very deeply religious. I don't know how much dogma is in his thinking, but
and there's a huge Christian overlay in the audience. So is he trying to not be isolated, by saying this is some other being? Because he's also said that it appeared as a bull, and he's talking about the lady and how this is all interrelated. And so it ends up being a blend of all sorts of religious ideas and UFOs with Chris. And that is prophecy. He's engaging in prophecy. Mm-hmm. So it seems like a nice guy. I wish him well, but you're either going to be right or wrong when you do that.
Right.
And the history with this phenomenon on when it set people up to be prophets is not good.
It's not, no.
So the track record is not good. You could be the good one. I don't know. But I guess we'll find out in April of 2026. Keel certainly thought that things like this happened during his time and that it was a setup, that the phenomenon would pull the rug out from the person at the end.
Right.
And I can't predict the future, but we're Forteans, so we just call out the history.
Right. So yeah, that was a good recap, a rapid fire recap of current events. I mean, we have to talk about it. So we have episodes where we dive really deep, and we have episodes where we just have to kind of sum stuff up. And I think that was perfect.
Oh yeah, and please check out our YouTube and TikTok channels. We've been putting up a lot of cool shorts and trying to engage there. Full disclosure, that's where we would like to monetize and maybe keep this podcast as ad-free as we can for as long as we can. We love this show.
Thank you to all of our listeners, and always gotta talk about the webpage ForteanWinds.com. You can
14 wins. Are you saying 14 wins?
Yeah, I know. I should probably spell that out. Fortean, as in Charles Fort, E-A-N.
Everyone says that. I don't know. If I could go back in time, maybe I would have just named us Gort.
Gort, yeah.
Gort with a G.
Welcome to Gort. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Until next time.
Thanks, y'all.